everyone, I'm Catherine, the artist behind Bigelow Fine Arts. How did the first part of your meteor turn out? I'd love to know. I just started up on MeWe and would love to build a coloring community there with everyone. If there is enough interest, I'd love to start a group for everyone to share their art, talk art, and discuss supplies. It is free to join MeWe and participate. Just skip the free trial. I'm moving on to the back section of the meteor today. My pencils have been sharpened and I'm ready to get going. Don't forget to place a sheet beneath this one to protect the pages underneath. Come along and join me and let's color this in together. I'm working with the phthalo blue and trying to find all the finger coral for my first coral to tackle. I'm going light on the layer here as I find this to be the best way to use the polychromos without damaging the tooth of the paper. Light layers and many of them. For the tips of the fingers, I am coming in with the grass green and giving them a couple of light layers, extending the green down the finger at least part way. I realized I missed a bunch here, so I'm coming back in with the blue, then hitting up the tops with the green. I begin to block off the shadows with the blue-greenish, working around the fingers and down into the spaces between corals. While I have the color in hand, I also give the tiered coral on the small meteoroid a light layer. Working some of the shadows behind the fingers helps them stand out from the background. I am now adding a layer of the cobalt green over the shadows and blending it up into the green at the tips of the fingers. Using yellow lemon on the green tips helps brighten up the green more, makes it stand out against the rest of the coral. It all comes together in the blending. I am keeping the yellow lemon just to the tips of the fingers. I don't need it to go further down. I want the yellow lemon to blend into the green, which blends into the cobalt green, and finally into the shadow at the bottom. And to get that shadow in place, I'm coming in with the sepia to define the shadows at the base of the coral and behind some of the fingers. I'll come back in with the blue-greenish to touch up the shadows and the green to better blend things. And with the blue-greenish, I want to hit up the tiered coral again, adding in some shadows under the tiers and following the stem down into the other coral. I'm lightening up the edges of the tiers with a layer of light phthalo blue, followed by a layer of ivory. I touch up the shadows again with the blue-greenish, then add in a layer of the cobalt green. There is some long waving coral here that I have been coloring pink. So with the purple pink, I am going to come in and add in several layers over all the corals I can find. Once finished, I add in the magenta at the base and blend it up into the middle a little. To finish the shadow at the base, I add in some sepia as well as touching up other shadows while I am at it. This bubble coral is next on my sights. I begin with a layer of the cadmium yellow over the whole coral. I layer on the orange, leaving just a crescent of yellow at the top for a highlight. I bring in the scarlet at the base and blend it up into the orange, but leave most of the orange visible. I blend in more orange and yellow, adding more layers to fill in the paper and bring up the saturation in the color. I use the scarlet again to fill in the crevices on the coral as well as add more layers at the base. A bit of sepia at the base finishes the shadows. I'm going back to the tiered corals, coming in with a base layer of the ivory. I follow that up with the blue-greenish. The ivory prevents the blue-greenish from being too dark. I really wanted something electric blue, and this was the best I could manage. I hit the edges of the tiers with the light phthalo blue. I added more layers on the blue-greenish in the shadowed areas to make it darker. More layers gives more saturation to the color, making it darker and richer. I put sepia on the shadows to finish them off, then add in a light layer of cobalt green. I'm not sure why. I feel like every coral is worked up slightly differently, because I can't remember exactly what I did the last or first time I colored them in, and I'm okay with that, because nature is variable. On the little meteoroid, I'm going to color in this tall coral like the yellow-red coral. I come in with the cadmium yellow, adding several layers to fill in the area and the tooth of the paper. I bring in the scarlet for the base, as well as some veining detail up the stalk, and blend it with the orange and more of the yellow. I don't know if I already colored in any tube coral, so I'm going to make something up, beginning with a layer of the green over the whole coral. I add in the yellow lemon to brighten up the color, then bring in the sepia to add in shadows. I add in a few more layers to fill in the tooth of the paper, and voila, another coral is done. I decided to come in with the warm gray 5 to fill in some of the background spaces to help me figure out what still remains of the coral. Some of the coral is hard to figure out as everything is still paper colored. Once I have the base layer down, I come in with the sepia to add in more shadows and bring out some of the texture in the rocks. And now I have a better idea of what is left. I decided to treat these balls similar to the bubble coral. I filled in the center with scarlet, added some orange around the opening, then filled in the bottom with the cadmium yellow. I used a little magenta in the opening to darken up the scarlet. I colored in the rest of the bubbles nearby, but I began with the yellow, filling in the center with the scarlet, then added in some orange around the opening. I add in sepia around the bubble coral to define them and give them their shadows. The carrot coral begins with a light layer of grass green over the whole coral. I follow that up with a light layer with the yellow lemon. I add in another layer of green on the body of the coral, then follow it up with another layer with the lemon yellow. I make the top bits more green. I layer on a few more layers with the green and yellow lemon before finally bringing in the sepia to define the shape more. I'm assuming that these are barrel shaped, so I want a deeper shadow on one side that fades up to the center. I also want a shadow at the base that would be cast upon the coral from any coral in front of it. The chain of cups here I wasn't sure what to do with. I began with a layer of the scarlet. It looks like I'm pressing hard, but the color is just really vibrant. I bring in the magenta at the base of each cup and blend in some orange on the top. Pretty simple. With the ivory, I am jumping up to the brain coral at the top. It is in the crease of the book and hard to see. I put ivory over the whole coral, then came in with the orange to define a few little wrinkles and dips in the coral surface. I layer in more ivory and use the magenta to add in some shadows. I deepen the shadows with the sepia, then go back in with all the colors and add more layers to darken everything up. I don't know what this coral could be. It looks like a snake with walls. I give it a base layer of cobalt green. I put the grass green on the top of the wall and sepia at the base of the wall for shadows. I deepen the shadows with the blue-greenish and call it done. There are a few of the tube corals at the top that I missed earlier, so I'm going to finish them up. A layer of green, a layer of yellow, and some shadows with the sepia. I go around and touch up shadows with the sepia. I'm calling this section finished for now. I will come in later to do the fish and the various other animals. Have you been following along? Please let me know. I'd love to know how your coral is progressing. I have my social media links below. Find me on Twitter, Instagram, MeWe, and Patreon. Patreon has a short write-up as well as all the palettes I am using and a list of the timestamps. You don't have to support me to see it. If you have any questions or page requests, please leave them below or reach out to me on social media. I put in a list of chapter breaks in the show notes as well as a list of equipment I like to use. If you use any of my affiliate links, it really helps me out without costing you a thing. I want to thank you all so much for coming along and joining in with me on this coloring journey. I appreciate all my subscribers and look forward to more of you joining in and coloring along with me. Please like, share, and subscribe to help that happen. Until next time, happy coloring!